Have you ever wondered why the people who once begged for your attention now barely notice your presence? Why your daily presence, your laughter, your loyalty became background noise? It's not just frustrating, it shakes your core. You start questioning your worth, your role, your identity. But here's the truth, maybe the issue isn't your presence, it's their blindness. What if the most misunderstood move in a relationship is also the most powerful one? What if pulling away, instead of leaning in, is how you reclaim your power? There's a deep misconception that distance equals defeat, that silence means surrender, that letting go means you lost. But what if I told you letting the distance grow might be the one move that flips the entire script of your life? This isn't about manipulation nor playing games. This is about radical self-respect, about embodying what Stoicism teaches us, to master what we can control, our actions, our energy, our boundaries, and release the illusion that we can make anyone see our worth if they choose to be blind. Too often, we cling, we explain, we beg to be understood. But what if the very silence we fear holds the power they'll never forget? This essay will walk you through a journey, a revelation, not based on trends or tactics, but rooted in emotional reality, personal awakening, and stoic strength. You'll understand why the echo of who you were becomes louder than your words ever did, why your absence becomes their obsession, why reclaiming your energy is not only your right, it's your rebirth. You'll learn how your distance, handled with grace, not bitterness, can transform not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. We'll challenge false beliefs that tell you to fight for love no matter what. We'll dismantle the myths that keeping close is always the answer. And we'll reveal a solution that doesn't just help you move on, it helps you rise, higher, stronger, untouchable. So don't click away. This isn't just content, it's a wake-up call. A reminder that your silence, your stillness, your space, when aligned with truth, becomes your greatest force. Let the distance grow and watch what chases you, not out of need, but out of newfound clarity. And stay till the end, because what we uncover there will leave you seeing your story, your scars, and your self-worth through a whole new lens. On the Stoic perspective on emotional detachment. In a world that romanticizes constant connection, emotional intensity, and unyielding attachment, the idea of detaching yourself from someone you once deeply cared for feels almost like a betrayal, both to them and to yourself. But from a Stoic lens, emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the pure, unfiltered realization that peace within is worth more than validation from without. Let the distance grow, we say. But why? Because true power doesn't emerge when we cling. It emerges when we release. It's in the letting go, not the grasping tighter, that we find the kind of inner stability Stoicism champions. Ask yourself, have you ever felt completely drained after trying so hard to make someone understand you, to get them to see your worth, to convince them you mattered? That is precisely where many falter. You see, Stoic relationships are built on the understanding that you cannot force someone to value what they're not yet ready to receive. And if they can't receive it, no amount of proximity will change that. You might be showing up every day, offering your best, sacrificing your time, your emotions, your peace, and yet be treated as invisible. The Stoics would ask, is this within your control? Because if it is not, it's not worth your suffering. That's the brutal but liberating truth. Emotional detachment is not a shutdown, it's a recentering. It's saying, I no longer offer my light to someone who only sees a shadow. In the Stoic framework, emotional detachment is not a reaction, it's a response. A chosen, thoughtful response rooted in the virtue of wisdom. You recognize what is no longer serving your growth, and with firm gentleness, You create space. That space, called distance, is not a wall. It is a boundary, a reminder to both you and them that your energy is sacred and your time is finite. Most people fear detachment because they think it leads to loneliness. But ask yourself, have you ever felt lonelier sitting next to someone who stopped seeing you than being alone in your own healing? That's the paradox. Stoicism teaches us to embrace solitude not as emptiness, but as wholeness. When you are no longer available for half-hearted efforts, for emotional crumbs, for being an afterthought, you become aligned with your higher self. In Stoic relationships, this isn't cruelty, it's clarity. The Stoic isn't cold. The Stoic is composed, not indifferent to others, but anchored within. Can you imagine loving someone and still choosing distance? Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring for yourself. That's the kind of strength most can't comprehend. People will accuse you of being heartless when you pull back, when you choose silence over explanations, when you walk away without turning back. But the Stoic knows your responsibility ends where your influence does. If your voice became background noise, your withdrawal will become their only focus. Your absence will scream the truth louder than your presence ever could. And that, in itself, is the echo they'll chase. Emotional detachment is powerful because it transforms you. It reclaims the energy you once handed out so freely. It resets your compass. Have you ever noticed how, when you finally let go, you begin to breathe again, to see clearer? That's not just healing, it's awakening. And yet, this perspective is often misunderstood. Society tells you to fight for love, to stay loyal no matter what, to never give up. But Stoicism tells you this: stay loyal to your values, to your peace, to your boundaries. Never give up on yourself. If someone can only recognize your value in your absence, then your presence was never appreciated. It was expected. And expectation without gratitude turns you into wallpaper. Always there, always overlooked. But once you become unavailable, you become unforgettable. That's the essence of detachment, not to disappear in bitterness, but to rise in wisdom, to understand that love is not enough if respect, effort, and reciprocity are missing. Detachment teaches you that your presence is not a given, it's a gift. And not everyone deserves access to your light. Ask yourself, have they earned your closeness, or have they assumed it? Have they responded to your vulnerability with presence or with neglect? The answers are often hard, but they reveal what must be done. Detachment doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love differently, starting with yourself. You start showing up for your own needs, protecting your own peace, pouring your energy where it is valued, not just received. In Stoic relationships, this shift marks a turning point. From victim to guardian, from chaser to chooser. You stop proving and start observing. You stop explaining and start evolving. And in doing so, you become someone they'll have to remember, not because you forced them to, but because your silence echoes louder than your effort ever did. That's the beauty of detachment. It isn't about being above emotion, it's about being beyond emotional chaos. You still feel, but you're not ruled by what you feel. You still care, but not at the cost of your soul. This is Stoicism in practice. It's deliberate, it's rooted, it's untouchable. So the next time you feel guilty for creating space, for pulling back, for letting the distance grow, remember, you are not retreating. You are resetting. You are not abandoning. You are ascending. And one day, when they realize what your silence meant, what your absence cost, what your love was worth, they'll chase every echo of what you were. But by then, you won't be waiting. You'll be walking forward, free and full. That's the Stoic way, and it begins the moment you choose yourself. That is the true power of emotional detachment, and it's only the beginning of your rise. Let the distance grow, not to punish, but to protect. Let it stretch wide enough for you to breathe, to rebuild, to become. Because once you understand, your worth, your presence becomes a privilege, and your distance becomes divine. And they'll chase the echo, not realizing the real you was never theirs to keep. It was only theirs to appreciate. But appreciation came too late. And you chose the Stoic path. You walked with silence. You led with peace. And now you are. The calm they cannot reach. The storm they'll never forget. The mystery they'll never solve. Let the distance grow. Because when you detach with love and rise with purpose, you become the kind of presence they can only chase, never capture. And that is your quiet triumph. Welcome to the wisdom of Stoic relationships. Welcome to the power of letting go. Welcome to you. 2. The power of absence. How distance creates desire. There's a paradox at the heart of every deep human connection. When someone is constantly present, they can start to fade into the background. Not because they've lost value, but because the human mind, undisciplined and easily distracted, begins to normalize even the rarest of treasures. This is where absence steps in, not as a punishment, but as a powerful mirror. The moment you step back, something profound shifts. What was once overlooked suddenly becomes missed. What was once routine is now remembered with aching clarity. You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when you stopped texting first, stopped calling, stopped checking in, and suddenly the silence wasn't just yours. It echoed through them too. Stoicism teaches us to value what is within our control. And what is within your control is this: your availability, your energy, your presence. When you choose to pull it back, to create a deliberate distance, you're not closing a door. You're opening a space for truth to enter. Ask yourself, how many times have you been taken for granted because you were always there? How many times did your consistency become invisible? It's a painful realization, but also a freeing one. Because it's in your absence that they begin to feel the weight of your worth. Distance becomes the catalyst for desire. Why? Because the mind clings to what it can't have. The more you pull away with grace, the more their thoughts return to you, not as someone needy or bitter, but as a mystery, a presence they didn't protect, a person they couldn't keep. And this desire doesn't come from manipulation. It comes from memory of how you made them feel, memory of your laughter, your calm, your presence, your power. That's the kind of imprint you leave when you stop trying to prove your worth and let your absence speak it for you. Think of it like music. The notes are powerful, but it's the silence between the notes that gives the melody its shape. In relationships, we often flood the space with noise, texts, calls, questions, check-ins, all in an effort to be heard, to be seen. But when you let the silence stretch, when you remove yourself from the rhythm they got used to, something unexpected happens. They start hearing the music again. They start listening. They start remembering, because the mind doesn't obsess over what's constant. It obsesses over what's gone. That's the raw human truth. That's the psychology of absence. And the Stoic knows how to use this, not to manipulate, but to realign. When you let distance grow, you allow them the opportunity to see what they ignored. You no longer shield them from the reality of their neglect. You no longer offer comfort to someone who stopped earning your care. And it's in that void, when your name no longer lights up their phone, when your voice no longer fills the silence, that they begin to feel the absence in their bones. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. Because people don't remember easy, they remember rare. They remember the ones who made them feel seen, safe, alive. And they remember the day that energy disappeared. You're not the villain in that story. You're the light that went out after too many storms. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you stopped chasing and they started noticing? When did your silence start saying more than your words ever could? That's the power you hold when you walk away with intention. That's the echo you create when you stop trying to be remembered and simply let them forget what they never truly appreciated until it was gone. Stoic relationships are not based on emotional games or impulsive actions. They are grounded in self-awareness and inner discipline. When someone shows they cannot hold your presence with care, the most stoic thing you can do is remove it, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. This is how desire is born, not from absence alone, but from the realization of what the absence represents. A love they can't replace, a soul they can't replicate. And what's even more powerful, you're not trying to be missed. You're not waiting around for recognition. You're moving forward, quietly, calmly, with dignity. And that forward motion is what creates the pull. You become someone they have to think about because you're no longer in the spaces they used to find you. They scroll through old messages. They hear your name in random places. They dream about moments they once dismissed. That's not coincidence. That's consequence. The consequence of not realizing what they had until it was no longer theirs to keep. Your absence becomes the flame they can't touch. It becomes the mirror they can't avoid. Every new connection they attempt becomes a comparison. Every new voice lacks the cadence of yours. And every attempt to move on feels like a rehearsal for something that already ended. You see, the Stoic doesn't chase what depletes them. They conserve their energy for what elevates them. And when you walk in that truth, you stop showing up where you're merely tolerated. You stop repeating yourself to ears that stopped listening. And that silence, that space, is where your power multiplies. Let them sit with the stillness. Let them feel the vacuum your energy once filled. Because the mind, left in silence, does not forget. It replays, it reanalyzes, it wonders. And they'll wonder about you, about the moment you stopped reaching out, about the shift they never saw coming, or about the echo that lingers in every room, every memory, every laugh that doesn't feel quite the same anymore. This is how desire is reborn, not in the noise of pursuit, but in the quiet of realization. They thought you'd always be there, that they could pick up the pieces if they ever needed to, that your love was a faucet they could turn on when convenient. But you turned off the water and walked away with the well. Because your energy is not infinite, your love is not unconditional when the conditions become disrespectful. Your presence is not a placeholder for their growth. It's a gift, one that, when taken for granted, is removed without apology. That's the kind of power absence holds when wielded with self-awareness. When you choose to detach, to walk away, to let the distance grow, you're not losing them. You're finding yourself. You're reminding your soul that it was never meant to beg for connection, but to attract it through truth. And your truth is this: you were never too much. They were never ready. They didn't lose someone who needed them. They lost someone they needed. Let that settle, let it echo, let it teach, because in that echo is your freedom. In that absence is their lesson, and in your silence is the clarity you've always been seeking. If this message stirred something in you, if you feel the truth of what's been said, then this is your moment to step into that power. Like and comment number 1 if you're reclaiming your strength by letting the distance grow. And if this kind of wisdom speaks to your soul, don't forget to subscribe, because we're only getting started on this path of reclaiming your peace, your energy, and your self-worth. Stoicism isn't just a philosophy, it's a way to live, to love, and to let go without losing yourself. Let the distance grow, and watch what follows. 3. Why letting distance grow is a form of self-respect. There comes a moment in every meaningful connection where you must decide, do I continue offering myself to someone who only consumes me, or do I withdraw, not in anger, not in pain, but in truth? That moment is pivotal. It is the intersection between love and self-respect. Many confuse love with endurance, believing that to love someone is to tolerate disregard, to accept emotional crumbs, to always be the one who holds space, no matter how little is returned. But love, in its truest form, never demands the sacrifice of your dignity. This is why letting distance grow is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of honoring yourself. It says, "I will not betray myself for someone who forgot how to value me." Stoicism, in its timeless wisdom, teaches us not to react, but to respond. And what is a more profound response to neglect than silent retreat? Not passive aggression, not explosive confrontation, but the calm, deliberate choice to step back and preserve your peace. In Stoic relationships, distance is not a weapon, it's a mirror. It reflects not only what the other person has taken for granted, but what you've overlooked in yourself. When you give and give, when you show up without being seen, you begin to abandon yourself in the name of love. And that is a betrayal no Stoic would condone. True self-respect is not loud, it does not scream, "Look at what you've lost." It simply becomes quiet, still, and untouchable. That's the kind of silence that shifts everything. Ask yourself, how many times have you stayed just because you were afraid of what would happen if you left? How many times did you shrink, did you bend, just to keep a bond that no longer nurtured your soul? Letting the distance grow is not you running away. It's you finally standing firm. It's saying, "I matter too." Because in Stoic relationships, both parties are responsible for maintaining balance, for watering the connection. When only one person carries the emotional weight, the structure collapses, not with noise, but with exhaustion. And so, you step back, not to teach a lesson, but to breathe again, not to punish, but to heal. It's easy to believe that if we stop trying, everything will fall apart. But here's the truth. If something falls apart because you stopped over-functioning, it was never truly stable to begin with. Your worth is not measured by how much you endure. It's measured by how much truth you're willing to live in. And the truth is, love without respect is dependency. Presence without appreciation is servitude. You are not here to prove your value. You are here to live it. And that begins the moment you stop negotiating your boundaries for the sake of someone else's comfort. Distance in this light becomes sacred. It becomes the space where you remember yourself, where you reclaim your voice, where you no longer exist as an extension of someone else's needs, but as a whole, vibrant being with your own. The person who is meant for you will never require you to silence your soul to stay close. They will meet you in your truth, but for them to do that, you must first model what self-respect looks like. And sometimes that looks like letting the distance grow. Stoicism teaches us that our peace is our responsibility, not theirs, not the world's, ours. That means protecting your emotional space with the same vigilance you'd protect your physical space. If someone walked into your home and disrespected it, you wouldn't hesitate to ask them to leave. So why do we allow people to tread on our emotional homes, our inner sanctuaries without boundaries? Letting distance grow is about drawing that line, not with hostility, but with honor. You begin to realize that your presence is a privilege, not a given. That being available to someone who doesn't reciprocate is not kindness, it's a disservice to your spirit. And when you withdraw, when you stop being so easy to reach, they will feel the shift, not because you wanted them to suffer, but because you stopped letting yourself suffer. That's the transformation. That's the turning point. You no longer chase clarity, you become it. You no longer beg for love, you embody it. And here's where the beauty lies. In your absence, they are forced to confront the reality of who you were. Not in the context of their convenience, but in the clarity of your distance. Every silent day, every unanswered call, every moment you remain grounded in your decision becomes a reflection of the value you now place on yourself. And that kind of value, that quiet, unwavering self-worth, is what shakes people to their core. They don't expect it. They're used to you showing up. They're used to your yes. They're used to your forgiveness. But now you've evolved. Now you understand that availability is not affection. That presence without reciprocity is no longer sustainable. In Stoic relationships, respect is non-negotiable. Without it, all the love in the world cannot build a foundation strong enough to withstand time. So you pull away, not to be elusive, but to be intentional, to give both of you the space to see the truth. Maybe they realize it, maybe they don't. That's no longer your concern. Your concern is your center, your clarity, your calling. And if someone cannot meet you there, they were never meant to stay. Letting distance grow is not the end, it is the beginning of a new relationship with yourself. One where you don't dilute your essence to be accepted. One where you don't perform worthiness, you simply live it. Think about this. When was the last time you allowed yourself to be fully alone, not just in body, but in spirit? No performance, no proving, just you, with you. That is where true power begins. That is where Stoicism lives, in the unwavering commitment to protect your peace, even when it costs you connection. Because not all connection is sacred. Some ties drain, some ties distract, and it is your responsibility to discern which is which, to know when to engage and when to step back with grace. The path of self-respect is often quiet. It doesn't seek applause. It doesn't need validation. It's just you walking away from what no longer aligns and walking toward the person you're becoming. Every step away from chaos is a step into clarity. Every moment of silence you choose over conflict is a moment of growth. And every inch of distance you create from those who no longer value you is a mile closer to your freedom. That's the truth most aren't ready for. But you are. Because you've felt it. You've lived the exhaustion. You've tasted the imbalance. And now you're done pretending, done shrinking, done sacrificing your peace for someone else's immaturity. This is your time to rise, to reclaim, to respect yourself so deeply that no one ever questions your worth again, not because you told them, but because you showed them, with your silence, with your distance, with your evolution. That is the heart of Stoic relationships. That is the power of letting go, not with bitterness, but with brilliance. So let the distance grow, not out of fear, but out of freedom. Let it stretch across the silence like a bridge you no longer need to cross. And as they look across that chasm, as they realize what's no longer within reach, they'll feel it, the weight of your absence, the gravity of your grace, the echo of the one they couldn't hold. And you'll keep walking, not because you had to, but because you finally chose to. And that choice, that's self-respect in motion. That's Stoicism made real. That's the beginning of everything you were always meant to become. 4. The psychological and emotional effects of creating space. There is a quiet revolution that begins the moment you stop forcing conversations, stop explaining your value, stop showing up for people who fail to see you. That revolution begins with space, pure, clean, intentional space. At first it feels uncomfortable. There's a tremor in the silence, a tug in the absence. You second-guess yourself. You wonder if you've made a mistake. Because everything in our culture has conditioned us to believe that love means closeness, that absence equals failure, that if you're not constantly available, you risk being forgotten. But the truth, the deep, soul-aligning Stoic truth is this: the space you create is not a void, it is a vessel for clarity, for healing, for rebirth. From a psychological perspective, space activates something deeply human in those who have grown used to your presence. It triggers the mind to reflect, to rewind, to re-evaluate. When you are always available, people don't think, they assume. They operate on emotional autopilot. But when you remove yourself, when you stop showing up out of obligation or habit. The system breaks. Suddenly, they are forced to notice the silence, to feel the shift, to question the comfort they mistook for permanence. This isn't manipulation, it's psychology. When something valuable disappears, the brain doesn't relax. It searches, it craves, it tries to re-establish equilibrium. And in that search, your name echoes louder than ever before. But here's the deeper truth. While they're sitting in that space, wondering where you went, you're using that same space to finally see yourself again. Emotionally, the effects of creating distance are powerful. You begin to reclaim energy that's been leaking from you for months, maybe even years. You notice how much mental bandwidth was spent thinking about how to fix things, how to be better, how to earn love that should have been given freely. That weight starts to lift, your body relaxes, your thoughts become clearer. You start hearing your own voice again, not the one distorted by their expectations, but your own inner wisdom. The part of you that was drowned out by noise is now speaking. That is not loneliness, that is liberation. In Stoic relationships, space is sacred. It's not an emergency, it's an essential element. The Stoic understands that emotions, while natural, should not control us. When we're too close to a fire, we can't see it clearly. We're blinded by the intensity, but when we step back, we see its shape, its size, its boundaries. Distance gives you perspective. Perspective gives you power, and power, true inner power, is the foundation of peace. Creating emotional space teaches you to stop reacting and start observing, to stop personalizing every silence, every delay, every neglectful act. Instead, you begin to ask better questions. What am I learning from this? What am I allowing? What do I truly deserve? This psychological shift is monumental. The energy you once used to overanalyze texts, to decode tone, to anticipate disappointment, that energy now flows back to you. It becomes creativity, clarity, confidence. You no longer orbit someone else's mood. You become the center of your own solar system. And yes, this distance affects them too. While you are healing in the quiet, they are encountering a version of reality they never expected. A reality where your presence is no longer a given, where your voice no longer reassures them, where your laughter no longer fills the room. The emotional effect, restlessness, reflection, sometimes even regret. And while that is not your goal, it is the inevitable outcome of imbalance finally exposed. The longer the space remains, the deeper the impact. This is why Stoic relationships endure, because they are built not on emotional chaos, but on emotional wisdom. Wisdom that says, if you must chase me, you'll never value me. Wisdom that knows, if I must explain my worth, you've already forgotten it. Wisdom that believes, I do not need to be seen by someone who only looks when I'm gone. The emotional weight of distance is not just felt by the one who stayed. It is often heavier for the one who thought they could afford to lose you. And you're no longer in pain. You're evolving. Space is where you stop reacting to what is and start envisioning what could be. You begin to imagine a life where you are no longer navigating someone else's storms, but building your own sunshine. You become more selective, more intentional, more honest, with yourself first, and then with others. Your standards rise, not because you're bitter, but because you're better. You begin to protect your peace like sacred ground, not letting just anyone walk through it, because you know what it costs to reclaim it. And in that knowing, you begin to attract differently. You begin to attract peace, presence, and people who value your presence without conditions. But let's be honest, this transformation doesn't happen overnight. At first, the space feels like emptiness. You might even question whether the distance is working, but with every quiet day, you become more rooted in your own worth. You no longer need to be remembered. You choose to be unforgettable. You no longer need to be needed. You choose to be whole. And while they scramble to fill the void you left behind, you are filling yourself with something far more powerful: integrity, clarity, self-command. Stoicism is not about detachment for the sake of superiority. It's about aligning your inner world so precisely that nothing outside of you can disturb your core. And that kind of alignment requires solitude, requires space, requires stepping away from dynamics that diminish you. The emotional effect of that step is profound. You stop hoping, you start knowing. You stop chasing closure. You start creating new openings. This is not the kind of power that comes from being louder or faster. It's the kind that comes from being still, being present, being real. And real always returns with resonance. So, if you felt the pain of stepping away, of growing the distance, know that what you're feeling is not loss, it's recalibration. It's the weight of your former self falling off. It's the release of roles you were never meant to play. And yes, they may miss you. They may long for the version of you that waited, that stayed, that overfunctioned. But that version is gone. Not erased, but evolved. They can chase the echo all they want, but you are no longer where they left you. You are ahead, free, full, and the most poetic part of all, they now feel what you once felt. They sit in the space you used to occupy. They listen to the silence you once broke. They search for the light you once freely gave. That's the impact of your distance. That's the legacy of your presence. If this message resonated with you, like and comment number 1 if you're stepping into your strength by embracing the space and silence you once feared. And if this truth is opening your eyes, subscribe, because this journey is just beginning. There's more to uncover, more to reclaim, more to become. Let the space heal you. Let the silence speak for you. Let the distance grow, not to create pain, but to create peace. Because in that space you rise. Stoicism isn't just resilience, it's your rebirth. 5. The ripple effect. How distance alters the dynamics of relationships. Every relationship operates on a subtle rhythm, a give and take, an energy exchange, an unspoken pattern. Over time, this rhythm either harmonizes or fractures, depending on the awareness and reciprocity of those involved. When you let distance grow, that rhythm doesn't just pause, it shifts entirely. This is the ripple effect. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. You stop texting first. You stop checking in. You stop trying to explain yourself or make your emotions palatable. And in that quiet withdrawal, something profound begins to unfold. Not just within you, but in the very structure of the connection itself. The emotional choreography you once danced to is now broken, and everyone involved is forced to find a new step. This is where the Stoic truth reveals itself. What you do not reinforce will eventually fall away. Not because you wanted to cause harm, but because your silence no longer sustained the illusion. In Stoic relationships, this shift isn't about revenge, it's about realignment. When someone grows used to your presence, your forgiveness, your effort, they often stop investing their own. They lean too heavily on your constancy, assuming that no matter how they show up or don't, you'll still be there. But the moment you pull back, they are faced with a reality they didn't prepare for. The dynamic shifts. Suddenly they are on the receiving end of uncertainty. They are the ones wondering, questioning, rereading old conversations. The absence you created becomes a mirror they cannot avoid, a mirror reflecting the parts of themselves they neglected to offer you. And what they see there, if they are honest, may discomfort them, because it reveals the imbalance, the laziness, the emotional entitlement they once held. But this ripple doesn't just affect them. It reverberates through your entire relational field. You begin to notice how your other relationships change. 2. When you stop being the person who always overextends, others start to notice. Some respect it, some resist it, but either way, the ripple continues. You become more discerning. You no longer say yes out of guilt. You no longer answer calls that drain you. You no longer explain your boundaries. You embody them. That embodiment sends a signal to the world. I know my value now, and I protect it with grace. And that signal changes the energy of everything around you. Some people step up, others step away. But you stay centered. And that center becomes the calm in the storm of shifting dynamics. Psychologically, the ripple is fascinating. It reveals the hidden dependencies people had on your emotional labor. When you step back, the space you once filled exposes the holes they never admitted existed. Your silence becomes their teacher. Your distance becomes their reality check. And yet, through it all, you don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to justify your choice. The very act of pulling back creates a momentum that speaks for you. This is where the Stoic way shines. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't seek validation. It simply moves with quiet conviction. It allows nature, the nature of relationships, the nature of truth, to do the work that words often cannot. This ripple effect also reveals what was always true, but unspoken. Some relationships only survived because you held them together. Your presence, your patience, your persistence kept them afloat. But a bond that relies on one person's effort is not a bond, it's a burden. And burdens, once released, do not collapse with a bang. They dissolve in silence. They vanish in stillness. And those left behind must sit in the void and decide, will they evolve or will they repeat? Will they grow into someone who reciprocates, or will they remain someone who only notices value once it's gone? The answer is not yours to find. Your only role is to create the space where that question becomes unavoidable. In Stoic relationships, this ripple is not a side effect. It is the goal. Not to disrupt for disruption's sake, but to clarify, to strip away illusion, to make space for truth to emerge. And here's the irony: the more grounded you are in your choice to step back, the more the ripple deepens, not just in the person who misused your presence, but in you. You begin to access new layers of your own power. You remember what it feels like to act from alignment, not anxiety. You stop seeking connection that requires self-abandonment. You stop mistaking tolerance for love. And with every wave of that ripple, you become more free. It's important to note that this ripple doesn't always bring people back. Sometimes it clears them out entirely, and that is not a loss. That is a blessing, because what remains after the ripple settles is what was meant to stay. Not what was convenient, not what was circumstantial, but what was mutual, real, resilient. And that kind of connection, it doesn't demand constant reassurance. It doesn't collapse under silence. It respects space. It grows within it. The Stoic doesn't chase what fades. They cultivate what endures. And endurance is only proven when the dynamic is tested, when the ripple comes. So ask yourself, what dynamics in your life are waiting to be recalibrated? Where are you overextending? Where are you undervalued? And what would happen, not just in them, but in you, if you let the distance grow? The answers won't come in a rush. They'll arrive in layers, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the aftermath of your retreat. Because the ripple isn't loud, it's deep. It doesn't demand attention. It commands awareness. And once awareness has arrived, change becomes inevitable. That's the true power of distance. It doesn't just shift relationships, it transforms them. And in the process, it transforms you. Let the ripple unfold. Let the silence stretch. Let the absence teach what your presence never could, because in the end, it's not about being remembered, it's about being respected, not about being needed, but about being honored. And you don't achieve that by holding tighter. You achieve it by letting go, with grace, with strength, with stoic purpose. Let the distance grow, and let the ripple do its work. 6. Embracing the echo, the long-term benefits of letting distance grow. There's something hauntingly poetic about the echo of a person who no longer occupies your space, but who continues to live in someone's mind. That echo, that memory, is not a residue of bitterness, but a signature of impact. And when you've let the distance grow with intention, with discipline, and with stoic poise, what follows is not just absence, but presence of a higher order. A presence that lingers in places it's no longer physically tied to. It's easy to think that walking away means losing your place in someone's life. But what if walking away with grace makes you unforgettable? What if the true power of Stoic relationships is found not in proximity, but in presence that persists even in silence? The long-term benefits of letting distance grow are both internal and external, and they often reveal themselves gradually, like dawn breaking through fog. Initially, the space you create feels empty. You might even mistake it for loss. But over time, that space fills with clarity, with peace, with power. Internally, you begin to notice how much calmer you are. Your nervous system no longer wired for emotional firefighting. Your heart no longer exhausted from overgiving. Your mind no longer burdened with confusion. This mental and emotional clarity isn't fleeting, it becomes your new baseline. The noise fades, and what remains is you, whole, present, untethered. From the chaos of someone else's inconsistency, externally, something else happens. People begin to respond to your energy differently. You're no longer the one they assume will always be there. You've redefined yourself, not with words, but with boundaries, with actions, with the kind of quiet power that can only come from a deep commitment to self-respect. This doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love differently, more intentionally, more wisely, more selectively. You're not closing your heart, you're elevating its standards. You're no longer pouring into broken vessels. You're investing in alignment, in reciprocity, in relationships that nourish rather than drain. Over time, the person who once took your presence for granted will feel the full spectrum of what your absence means. At first, they might pretend not to notice. Pride has a way of disguising pain, but slowly, surely, they begin to feel it. In the quiet moments, in the places you used to fill, in the rhythms of life that once danced to your consistency, they'll remember your laughter in rooms that feel quieter now, your kindness in conversations that now feel colder, your energy in spaces that feel dull. That echo, it's not something you chased. It's something you left behind, unintentionally but undeniably. The Stoics never taught us to disappear out of vengeance. They taught us to choose peace over proving. They taught us to trust that truth eventually rises, and that presence is most respected when it is not always guaranteed. The echo of who you were is a natural consequence of showing up fully and leaving when that fullness is no longer met with appreciation. You don't have to remind them. Life will. You don't have to prove your worth. Time will. This is the long game of Stoicism, patience without pettiness, departure without drama. You become a memory not because you disappeared, but because you stood firm in your value. And that firmness, that centeredness, is what they'll return to in their mind over and over again. This echo does something even more profound. It becomes your legacy. Not in the sense of fame or grandeur, but in the personal imprints you left behind. It shows up when they meet someone new and feel an inexplicable hollowness. When they hear a phrase you used to say and their stomach tightens. When they realize that no one has made them feel as deeply seen since. The echo is the part of you they carry because they never fully understood you when they had the chance. And here's the Stoic lesson in all of this. You don't need to control the echo. You don't need to shape it or direct it. Your only job was to live fully, to love authentically, and to leave when your spirit was no longer safe. That's what makes the echo so powerful. It isn't a strategy, it's a side effect of truth, of alignment, of emotional discipline. And while they carry that echo, you carry something greater, the wisdom of choosing yourself. You walk lighter, you speak clearer, you sleep deeper, because you're no longer tangled in the exhausting performance of trying to be enough for someone who was never ready to receive you. This is how peace becomes your new identity, and that peace becomes magnetic. Others feel it. They notice the way you no longer chase, the way you no longer seek permission to be yourself, the way you simply are, whole, calm, present. That kind of energy attracts differently. It draws people who are ready, who are conscious, who meet you where you are instead of asking you to come down. In Stoic relationships, this is the full circle moment. You realize that distance was never the problem. Proximity was. Being too close to people who couldn't see you was the real loss. And once you've tasted what distance can teach you, you stop fearing it. You start using it as a filter, as a guide, as a compass, back to yourself. Every step away from what depleted you was a step toward a life that sustains you. And in this new life, you don't wait to be chosen. You choose. You don't explain your boundaries, you live them. You don't react to being forgotten. You embrace being unforgettable. The long-term benefit of letting distance grow is that you become untouchable, not in a way that isolates you, but in a way that elevates you. Your self-worth becomes non-negotiable. Your peace becomes your home. And from that place of power, you no longer settle. You no longer shrink. You no longer seek closure from people who offered you confusion. You become the echo in their mind, yes. But more importantly, you become the presence in your own life, loud, clear, whole. If you've reached this point and this message stirred something within you, then you're not just watching, you're awakening. Like and comment. Number 1. If you feel yourself stepping into this echo that no longer chases, but commands. And if this kind of transformation speaks to your soul, subscribe, because the journey doesn't end here. Stoicism is not a moment. It's a way of moving, a way of becoming, a way of remembering who you are even when others forget. Let the distance grow. Let the echo rise. Let your peace become the loudest sound in the room. In the end, letting the distance grow is not about becoming unreachable. It's about becoming unshakable. It's not about punishing others for their failures, but about refusing to betray yourself any longer. You are not walking away to cause pain. You are walking away to preserve peace. That's what Stoicism teaches us. It teaches us that freedom lies in our response, not in their recognition. That strength is found not in holding on, but in knowing when to let go. You gave your presence freely. You showed up with love, with loyalty, with light. And when that light was no longer valued, you did the only thing left to do. You stepped back, not out of resentment, but out of reverence for who you are becoming. Your silence, your distance, your absence. It was not a disappearance. It was a declaration, a quiet, dignified affirmation that you will no longer be a background note in someone else's life when you are meant to be a melody in your own. And while they may spend years chasing the echo of what you were, you will no longer be there waiting. You will have become someone new, stronger, wiser, fuller. That is the promise of Stoic relationships. They don't crumble under silence. They crystallize into clarity. So take one last look behind you, not to mourn, but to remember how far you've come. And then face forward with your head high and your spirit calm. Because the story doesn't end in the echo. It begins in the rise. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are found by yourself. And that is the greatest love you will ever know. Thank you for walking this path. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, for rising. May your journey continue with strength, with serenity, and with the kind of self-respect that transforms everything it touches. Be well, be free, and always be true.